So the battery in your car, it's not to be overlooked. It's a very, very important part, and any degradation in the battery's performance could well leave you stranded at the side of the road, or at the very least experiencing a lot of inconvenience and a lot of extra hassle. So how do we keep our battery in good condition or top condition? What are some of the checks, the processes that we can go through just to make sure that that battery is performing at its optimum level? And what are some of the things to look out for that might indicate that the battery has started to experience degradation in its performance? Well, you may have noticed that the car takes longer to start, that the lights dim more at night when you start the engine, that things are just not quite working as effectively in the car, or the starter motor just sounds like it's struggling to start or is turning over the engine very, very slowly. Now, you may be in a situation where it's been doing that for a while, and that really was a warning sign that the battery life is degraded, that very soon that battery is going to die on you. So what are some of the things that we as a driver should be doing just to make sure that our battery is in top condition? Well, the first thing is regular battery check. Using a multimeter, we can test the voltage across the battery terminals, and when the engine is off, we're looking for a measurement round about 12.6 volts. Anything over 12.4 volts is considered good. So what's that voltage actually telling us? Well, it's telling us the amount of energy that's currently stored in the battery. Anything between 12 volts and 12.3 volts would indicate the battery is somewhere between 25% and 75% charged. 12.4 and 12.5 would measure the battery storage at about 75% to 90%. And anything over that, the battery is fairly fully charged, so we haven't got anything to worry about. So just taking a measurement on the battery can tell us what the battery life is. And if we do that over a period of time, we'll build up a picture. Is the battery struggling to store its charge? Is it on that gradual decline? Are we seeing the capacity dropping? Because as we use the car, the battery should be getting topped up from the alternator, putting energy back into the battery itself. So a few other things that we should be checking. It's the battery terminals. These become corroded. They've got power running through them. They're made of metal. They're exposed to the elements. So there's an amount of condensation that forms on these, so eventually they will start to corrode and degrade. So we would certainly want to make sure that this corrosion is not building up, because that can affect the flow of power from the battery and lead to all sorts of weird issues or low power issues. You may need to disconnect the cable, use a wire brush just to brush off the corrosion that has happened on the battery terminal. You may even need to use something to neutralize that build-up on the battery terminals, particularly if it's a corrosive build-up that has happened. So a lot of people are recommending baking soda and water mix. Some people recommend Coca-Cola, of all things. These have all gone some way to restoring the life of these battery terminals, bringing them back to their nice shiny factory state. If you've got some comments as to what worked for you, please let me know in the comments. I love building up a picture of what people are doing to address this very common issue around the world. And please boot the like button, because that really does help us to get out there. One of the most common things that I see when you start talking to people who've had a failed battery, it's the way they use the car. It's again short journeys. Short journeys, you're taking a lot of power out. You're generally using the blowers in winter and the heater to raise the heat levels inside the car and clear the frost or the mist that's built up on the windows in order to drive the car. But also you've got the start cycle, and starting a cold engine generally requires much more energy and power than starting an engine in a warmer environment. All of this additional drain is coming out of that battery's capacity, and if you're only doing a short journey, you're not giving it long enough to get that charge back into the battery. In some cases, you need to be driving 10 to 20 minutes just to recover the energy that was taken out of the battery for the starter motor to actually start cranking the car in the first place. So you can see these short journeys become very detrimental. So we either avoid lots of short journeys, because that's going to degrade the overall capacity of the battery, or we use a charger and dribble a trickle charge into the battery once a week just to keep it topped up. The lower the battery level gets, the more hard work the battery has to put into storing the next amount of charge. And it's these charge cycles, where they're quite extreme charge cycles, that really accelerate the wear and tear on most types of modern battery. So the more we can minimize that, if we can keep it at that sort of 80% charge level or thereabouts, it minimizes the stress that the battery has to go through in order to service your needs. So think about the electrical drain on the battery, all the accessories. Do you have a charger plugged in all the time in your car? A lot of people do. The cigarette lighter is often the culprit. People have a charger in that's drawing a tiny amount of current all the time, but it is drawing current all the time. Also, the entertainment equipment in the car, the sat nav, the other things that come on when the ignition is switched on. If you sit in the car for long periods of time with the ignition on, these are all draining the battery. So we just need to be aware that all of these things that are running inside the car will drain that battery. So if we're not using the car, we're just sitting in it, we should be turning the ignition off completely, and even removing the key from the ignition in some engines to completely isolate the car's electronic system from the battery, to just avoid that drain that is naturally happening. Another thing that I've seen happen is people use these tire pressure inflators that go into the cigarette lighter, and they don't switch the engine on, so they're effectively running that pump directly from the battery. And you might get away with that on a good battery if you're only doing it once in a while, but at winter time, if that battery is really struggling, that can be just enough to push the battery over the edge, and it's then going to struggle to start, and you're just going to be stuck at the side of the road. So always invest in a high quality battery. Buy cheap, buy twice. That's the mantra. I keep saying this to people. If you buy cheap, it's going to let you down. You're just going to have to go out and buy the thing again, and maybe get the better quality one second time around. So when you're looking at batteries, look at the general cranking power that they produce, the amount of amps that they can deliver, and get a feel for how powerful the battery is in relation to the one that is currently on the car. So if the numbers are smaller than what you've got on the car, that's probably not ideal. You should be looking to at least match whatever numbers are written on the battery itself in terms of the ampage and the cranking power of that battery. If you can exceed it, it means you've got more capacity. The battery is effectively a store of electrical energy, and the bigger that store is, the more you can abuse that battery and take the power out without it starting to struggle. There's a lot of different technologies of battery out. You've got the absorbent glass mat batteries, which use an absorbent glass mat to just wick up the electrolyte, and they are generally one of the best batteries that you can buy commonly for the average car. There's obviously much higher performance alternatives out there and lightweight options, but in terms of the ease of use, they're sealed for life, they're maintenance free, and they don't spill if they fall over. They last a lot longer, and they have greater performance than the original lead acid batteries that you would have got maybe years ago. Always look for reputable batteries and online marketplaces. We've done quite a few videos on the things that you can get caught out on, and one of them is buying these no-name parts that are imported from other countries that just don't have the same quality standards that some of the bigger brands are operating. Some of them may well do, so do your research carefully. There are lots of good brands out there, but there are also some really bad brands of battery, and just looking up a few reviews will flag those up as things that you should certainly steer clear of and avoid at all costs. So while we're on this subject, is choosing the right type of battery for your car. If your car has stop-start technology, for example, you need a much higher capacity of battery, because the stop-start system is going to be switching the engine off, and you're going to be sitting there with the radio on, maybe the air conditioner or the blowers going, and all the other electronics in the car. And a conventional battery would very, very quickly give up on you. You just wouldn't have enough reserve in the battery for these periods where the car is sitting in traffic. And what generally happens is the car's stop-start system will stop working. The engine will be running all of the time, and you won't have the benefits of having your stop-start system on the car, just because the engine is always on and the battery is always struggling to keep up with the load that's being put on it. And these stop-start cars also have stronger starter motors. They're more powerful, they crank the engine faster, they provide more torque, and the car starts much more quickly on these newer stop-start engines than they ever did on those pre-stop-start engines that we got years ago. So all of that takes a toll on the battery and the battery's life. You can get EFB enhanced flooded batteries. These are really heavy duty. They're optimized for these stop-start engines, and they basically just have tougher, bigger, thicker electrodes in them, and they can store huge amounts of power for longer periods of time. The other type is the SLA, or the sealed lead acid battery. Now these are generally the cheaper ones. They're generally not suitable for stop-start engines because they have a smaller reserve capacity. But again, talk to the manufacturer, talk to the salespeople. There are all kinds of different types of battery out there, and it would be impossible to just make a blanket statement in a video like this that covers all these types of batteries. Some of these contain a gel inside as the electrolyte to prevent spilling. Some of them use this AGM, the absorbent glass mat technology as well. They're all sealed. They have vents because batteries do release gases. The process of running the electric through a battery and taking the electric out of the battery will release gases and vapors, and as this builds up, you obviously don't want that pressure building up inside the sealed battery, so it's generally vented outside as well. So protect the battery from extremes of temperature. They don't like being too cold and they don't like being too hot. So think of your battery as Goldilocks. It's got to be just right. So if you live in a very cold environment, a lot of cars now come with a little box that the battery sits in that provides a little bit of extra thermal protection for the battery in these extreme climates. And bear in mind that the engine bay area does tend to get quite hot anyway. So as the engine is working, the battery is exposed to this hot air coming off the engine. So having these little boxes around the battery can go some way to minimize the stress that the battery goes through just because it is getting too hot. If you live in an area that has extreme cold temperatures to deal with, you need to be bearing that in mind when you go out and buy a battery. You're looking at the CCA, the cold cranking ampage of the battery, and you want that to be as high as possible so that you don't get let down by your battery in these winter conditions where you need to start your car. If you can park your car in a shady area in summer or in a garage or under some sort of cover or protection during winter, that can also go some way to just preventing the cold from getting right in there. And another thing we don't really have to do nowadays, and that's top up the battery. So if you've got one of the older batteries that are not maintenance free, they've got little caps that you need to pop off, and you can top up the electrolyte levels in those. You just need to make sure that those levels are correct. If they start getting dry, you're going to have much less voltage coming out of the battery, and it's going to lose some of its capacity and power. So these need to be topped up with distilled water, and you need to check those every few months. So think yourself fortunate that we don't have that extra maintenance inconvenience that we had on older cars. But let me know if you've got one of these older battery types in your car. I know quite a few of you have got these classic cars or much older cars. So have you switched to more modern battery technology in those, or are you sticking with those original batteries that need topping up? So the overall key is just to maximize our battery's life. We don't want a car to let us down, and the battery is one of the things that's doing so much work in the engine. It takes a lot of stress, and we need to think about it as a driver and just make sure that that is in good condition. And by doing that, we can avoid those breakdowns, those inconveniences that will just leave us stranded at the side of the road. So please boot the like button. That really does help us to get out there. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. We'd hate you to miss out on all the great content we've got coming up. I want you to stay tuned. And I've lined this video up for you that you should find really interesting, and this playlist as well, that will help you to get the best out of your car in the long term. Thanks for watching. See you in these next videos.